give me an overview on the history, what EMPs are,
Sure.
history of them, what we're looking at with that.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing is for those that don't believe there's such a thing, there really is such a thing. There's certain people out there, even congressmen, who said, yeah, there's nothing, this isn't even real. The debate is only about the severity of the damage it could cause, right? We've known since at least the 60s when we were doing the tests, Starfish Prime, everybody knows about those tests, and Russia was doing tests as well,
Right.
that if you detonate a nuclear warhead, especially high in the atmosphere, you can generate a very powerful electromagnetic effect, an electromagnetic pulse that comes out. And we have a lot of modern electronics that are very susceptible to powerful electromagnetic waves. Much less so back in the 60s, by the way, right? Those electronics were much harder to damage with radiated energy like that.
Right.
But nowadays, with laptops, and cell phones and cars and everything you can think of, they're all very modern and they have very small devices which make them easier to damage from overvoltage conditions. And so an electromagnetic pulse is basically that. You detonate a high altitude nuclear warhead. It generates a very broad band is what they call it. It means it has energy in lots of frequencies that travels down to the surface of the earth, couples into conductors, wires of any sort, even if they're teeny tiny, and then flows to these semiconductor devices, causes damage to them. And that's that. You cause some damage to a lot of electronics. Now, as I said, there's a lot of debate over exactly what would happen from a full power EMP over certain parts of the US, let's say. Some people predict it's the end of the world as you know it. All the power grid will fail, and these big transformers are very hard to replace and very expensive, very hard to make. So you could be without power for up to a year. I think that was what the EMP Commission concluded.
Mm.
I think it's kind of pessimistic, but somebody needs to be pessimistic. But even in an optimistic scenario, it would be unlike any catastrophe we've had. It would shut down millions of vehicles. It would take out probably trillions of dollars worth of damage to the country. So it would be a massive problem. Whether or not it killed everybody due to the side effects of not having food and water and electricity would be open to debate, but it would certainly disrupt a lot of things. And so the military's known about it for a long time. We're not the only country with EMP weapons. We can certainly detonate an EMP over Russia if we wanted, or over China, but they can do the same thing to us. There's very little you can do about it. The weapons are detonated very, very high up in the atmosphere, maybe 300 miles or so. So they launch a rocket. You can't really intercept it and destroy it in time. It's going to detonate, cause the EMP. And there's not a lot you can do about it other than harden your systems. Our country, probably like most countries, really hasn't taken it very seriously, even though we did have a commission and they investigated it and they came up with some pretty scary conclusions and some strong recommendations. I think most of those have not been followed as far as I know, unless it's classified in some way, just because it's expensive to harden things, right? Our grid, as you know, is extremely complicated, much more complicated than people think. And hardening it is not like you just go to one person and say, oh, we'd like you to harden the grid. Here's $1 billion. There's hundreds and hundreds of these utility related companies that all have a hand in different things. And so not making excuses for them, but the short answer is I don't think our commercial, or our industrial side of things has ever really been hardened in any way. And I think it's very susceptible. Our military is probably a bit better. We do test military hardware for electromagnetic pulse, just like satellites. When we put satellites up in space, EMP is one of our tests that we run. So people think every satellite's going to get destroyed. I think that's unlikely. If an EMP occurred in space, you'd certainly take some things down, but I don't think you'd take all the satellites because some of them are pretty hard from that sort of thing. So anyway, that's kind of the idea of it. Big nuclear bomb detonates, causes a big EMP wave, causes all kind of problems to anything electronic, really. The more modern it is with the modern electronics in it, the more likely it is to be damaged. And the longer the conductors are that are on it, the wires are, or whatever, the more likely it is to pull that energy into it. So that's kind of the gist of it. Yeah.
And they first found these at like when they were doing nuclear test experiments back in the 50s, and I assume.
Yeah, I think they predicted them, but they had never seen them before. And then when they started detonating these bombs, they realized, hey, we are getting these big waves and they're stronger than we ever thought they'd be. And there's some famous data about, they detonated way out over the Pacific and all the way at Hawaii. There was damage to some of the stations there and stuff, even I think that they never predicted. So it was a little more powerful than they thought. Now, we can make much stronger bombs today than they could back then. and we can generate EMPs that essentially are at the limits of the physics of it. And so you're talking about at least 50,000 volts per meter, maybe even higher. Some people report maybe even up to 100,000 volts per meter, which is enough to damage, most everything, with the exception of maybe like big industrial motors and things like that.